In this episode 3 of this series, Leo is still recovering from his sickness. Thus a real Viking has to do some talking for him, with a sexy Scandinavian voice. We will in this episode show you how you can use old Sector Imperialis ruins to create a settlement, combined with other Games Workshop kits. And as Leo promised, he will also try to explain how he built his first settlement 10 months back. Yeah, let's see how that works out. I do have my concerns. Welcome to Rapid Tabletop. My name is Christopher and...
Hey,
oh shit!
Way too early for this shit. Well, that was Christopher, and he's not supposed to show his sexy Scandinavian face until later on this spring when we're doing our Necromunda campaign that we're going to record actually. But in this episode we're going to be talking about the terrain and continue with settlements. And this will be a short one because we're going to be covering the last two pieces here. And that's going to be the one here, which I'll show later on in the video, of course. It's going to be the one built out of old ruins from the Sector Imperialis from Games Workshop, and one that I made 10 months ago. And this will be the third video in this series. And I'll put a link up here to the second one that I made, and somewhere in the video I'll put in the link for the first one. And if you do like the content, do please consider becoming a patron. That would really help me out, creating more content for you guys. And of course, as usual, subscribe and leave a like. So let's dive into this last settlement builds on the second floor. So for this last one we're going to be using parts from an old Sector Imperialis ruin. Some of you guys might have them laying around. And also we're going to combine it with some new kits. First of all, I'm going to cut off these little supports on the platforms. Do not throw away these pieces that you cut off. They will be used later on. And use your mold line remover, of course, to clean up the sides. And here I actually cleaned the small parts that I cut off because I'm going to use them later on. Here I need to cut off the sides because I'm only going to use the main beam here, or the main part of it. So use a saw and cut off the sides. In this case it was a little bit too tight and too hard for me to stabilize it when sawing, so I had to use a vise to stabilize it. Not sure if you guys have one at home, but this one was quite cheap and something I have laying around for occasions like this. Then once the piece is cut off, I need to measure out how long this beam is going to be, so just measuring with the piece it's going to be connected to in the future. And of course, then use your trusty saw. And of course, I do love my mold line remover. Cross-checking so the pieces will fit together. Now the pieces will not lay down exactly like this, because that blue old ruin wall here, that one is going to be of course tipped over 90 degrees. Here I'm just checking so the distance is correct, so the roof has the same length as the wall. Here I'm showing that these two little nudges, they need to go because there will be a little bit in the way when I'm going to proceed with my build. And you will see this later on. But for now, cut them off. Using a hobby knife to make the final adjustments. And of course I do love using my mold line remover again, because if I would slip or anything, I would not hurt myself. It is important to make sure that both sides will look similar. So I decided to have this beam pointing downwards. So I have to make sure that the other wall also has its beam towards the ground. And here's why we took away those little notches, so it would fit directly onto the wall. Here on this second wall there's some parts or details actually that is a little bit in the way for the roof to fit perfectly. So we need to cut away these details to make it fit nicely. Same thing goes with the other wall. There's a long pipe going along the wall here, and this one needs to be cut off. Using the knife very carefully, because I'm not really used to using a knife anymore, because I mostly use the, well, surprise surprise, the mold line remover. So I usually cut downwards towards the table or the cutting board, so I will not cut myself. Here I'm cross-checking, so there's no obstructions, and it looks like it's okay, except for the second wall, of course, that still needs some adjustments. And as usual, always cross-check. And since it's cross-checked, I can now start gluing it. And of course, as usual, plastic glue, so if I make any mistakes, I can always readjust. And look at that, the vacuum cleaner comes in to take up all those little nasty particles from the sawing. Due to some battery issues with my camera, I didn't really realize that I stopped recording, so I didn't get the part where I was cutting the floor tiles into the correct size, but you could pretty much figure out what I did. Just measuring up how much of the second floor tile I need to cut off. So assembling the whole thing here now, and that's another thing that didn't get recorded properly, so just try to figure out how to add 2 walls, a roof, and then of course the floor. And there we have the basic shape of the settlement. What we're missing now is the side walls, and of course that little beam needs to go in between. As usual, I always cross-check, making sure it can fit before I start gluing. And of course the plastic glue will help, because if there's some final adjustment that needs to be done once it's in place, I can adjust. And as you can see here, I'm moving around, making minor adjustments just to make it fit perfectly. And again, I cannot really point this out even more, that this is not possible as easy with super glue. This is why it is very essential to use the plastic glue to make these adjustments. And here on the sides of the rooftop here, it's a little bit flat, so I want to decorate it a little bit, and this is where the pieces come in that we cut off before from the floor tiles. They have some nice little details there, and while not super impressive, it actually adds a little bit to the settlement here. There we go, it just looks totally different here now, or to some extent different. Every settlement needs some way of gaining access, so of course I looked through my bits box and found an old door here. But this one doesn't really fit, so I need to make some, well, I wouldn't call it major modifications, and it's not really minor modifications either, but it requires some patience. First of all, I need to cut off everything that's on the inside here. Or not all of it, but pretty much most of it, because they're in the way of the pretty thick walls that I have made inside. This is a quite tedious work, but with some time and the correct tools, it is possible. And as you can see, I have the Games Workshop cutter, I have a mold line remover, and that's pretty much what I used here for this one to clean it up on the inside. Yeah, and here I'm indicating that my initial plan was just to cut off the sides here, but I didn't calculate for the very thick walls and the thick roof, so I had to cut off, like I said in the beginning, pretty much everything on the inside. And I didn't record all of it because it's not really interesting to watch, and of course you understand the principle of just cutting it loose. So hopefully when I'm gluing this together it should fit nicely. And will you look at that? Fits very well. Except for this little part here, it's a small gap, and I will try to adjust that or fix it later on. And here we go, and this is what I usually do when I do my kit bashes. Unavoidably there will be some gaps, and instead of making all these minor adjustments, I will just cover it up with some cables or extra barricades or something, just to make it fast and easy. And it also makes it look more chaotic and used, which suits the Necromunda underhive. This piece here I think is from the Sector Imperialis, the one with the 4 statues. I'm not 100% sure, I just found it in my bits box. And yeah, I'm struggling a little bit to get it onto the wall here, and that's because I didn't really plan for this and had to find a solution. So minor adjustments are made, and you can see here that most of us make mistakes and it takes time to correct it. Well, that took longer than expected. There we go, now it's all covered up. So for this second, or whatever we should call it, second, fourth settlement here, This one I made 10 months ago, as I have said a couple of times now, and I didn't record how I made it, so you're gonna see a rotating picture or video image of this settlement, and I will try to explain parts used and how I actually built it. But in the end, it uses the same principles that I have actually used now on the containers previously and on this ruined settlement that we just made and saw. So let's take a look and just bear with me with this rotating image. So let's start with the easy one, the container. As you can see here on the sides, just like the previous one in episode 2, there's just some easy and simple details added to it. The ladder might seem a little bit out of place, but it has its reasons for being there, and that will be shown in the last and fourth video of how to build this settlement tile. It will be acting as an access point. And as mentioned before, every little settlement needs some kind of entrance, and this is my solution for it. I made a very bad hack job here for making a entrance. Very novice using the Dremel, and as you can see, this is why I do not use a Dremel, because I am very bad at it. But I managed to make a small hole and actually put some kind of door. Yeah, it's the one from the silos. And as you can see here on the back side as well, I'm now using the same principle to make the second part of this settlement. And to be quite honest, it's actually the same parts. This is from the old Sector Imperialis ruins. Tilt over onto the side just like the previous one. And maybe if you notice here I have decided to use the beams to be pointing upwards instead of downwards. Also to note that I have added the railings, the old railings from the Sector Imperialis on top of this wall that is tilted. This is to increase the height a little bit, because the walls are a little bit shorter than the wall that you will see here coming up shortly. And there we go, this is my best attempt, I guess, on using the Dremel. Trying to drill out a opening for, of course, gaining access into this little settlement here. And this wall, you might recognize, comes from Zone Mortalis and is what I call a short wall section. I don't have a door attached to this because this is the entrance to what I think should be like a fast food chain or whatever it is, so they don't really care about a door. Coming up to the front, and here we have the wall that we saw on the settlement tile that we had previously. And this will serve as the service point to deliver the fast food that they're creating inside this little settlement. And on top you can see I've used barricades here, and once this one is done, these barricades will have posters, menus, and whatever is going to be served inside of this little shack that I have created here. And you can see here on the container again, once we have rotated, that I've used the top of the columns again to fill out the back part of the container. Back in this time I actually cut it down piece by piece to fit into this gap. So this one was quite hard to adjust and get right, and that is why I have added so much texture paint onto this one to cover up all the mistakes. Moving on to the top of the settlement creation here. Not much is really added here, but you can see I've used some old ruin floor tiles, and then there's a small gap, of course, between the container and the other settlement. So to cover up this gap, probably do whatever they do in real life when there's a small gap. You create a small bridge or something. So I used one of the barricades, cut off the supports, so it became very flat on the back side. And here you can also see that I've added the texture paint at certain locations, and one of them is here at the ladder. This is to indicate that this is where people usually walk or gain access. And you can see I've also added some texture paint over at the damaged floor tile area, and that is just to get some kind of texture. And here we have a sneak preview of what it's going to look like when it's completed. Well, minus the paint job, of course. The containers downstairs, I'm not sure yet if they're going to be like that or if I'm going to damage them in some way, but these are just the ones that I had at hand to check what it would look like. And of course you can see here on the back side that there are some additional settlements that we'll cover in the fourth video. So that's it for this one. I know this one is a very short one, but it was supposed to be connected with the previous one, the second episode. But it would be a little bit too long to combine all of it, so I decided to cut it in half. And then of course just make the videos or the editing a little bit faster instead for you guys. And as usual, do consider becoming a patron, as it will help out a lot for this channel so we can create more content for you guys. And again, subscribe, leave a like, and I'll see you guys in the last episode of How to Build.